David Harker, US 529399857, and December the 8th, 1945, private first class. And so I wrote them and told them I'd been wounded and everything was okay. Just a piece of shrapnel in my head.
That's all.
That's all. So I'm lying there, and I know I'm going to die. It's no way I'm going to make it home. And yes, I did. I was afraid. And I've got him in a vice grip, and I'm desperate to get away, and I know I've got to kill him without making any noise. If they take me out and blindfold me and I hear the click of somebody locking and loading a weapon, I'm going to tell them everything they need to know. Philippians 1:21, I found it. I finally went through, I'm looking through. I finally find it. I said, that's my verse. To live is Christ, to die is gain. Next thing I knew, he had put a round in the chamber of his rifle. He had fixed his bayonet. And that'll get you moving, even though physically you think you can't do it. Time magazine quoted me, happiness is returning home to the United States of America, where everybody's heart is full of gold, the size of the Empire State Building. Quote David Harker right off the top of my head.
Welcome to another edition of No Holds Barred. I'm Rich Roth, and my guest today, in honor of Veterans Day, which was yesterday, David Harker joins me now on No Holds Barred. Hi, David. How are you?
Fine, Rich. Thank you for having me.
Well, I really appreciate having you. I've heard from a number of people. Mary kind of clued me in right off the bat that you have a really neat story, not neat, but a compelling story that you're more than happy to tell. And I spoke with Steve Bozeman, and you got to have David on. You got to have David on. So I'm really appreciative that you're willing to come on and kind of continue to share your story. I mean, we'll dive into it, but you were a prisoner of war for over 5 years.
Yes, 5 years, 2 months.
In Vietnam. And, and I was telling you before we even sat down that at least not knowingly, I don't know that I've ever spoken to anyone who's been through what you've been through. So, again, I'm just really appreciative of you willing to kind of share your story and your experience, because there are so many folks who, and I know I'm one. I mean, it's hard to believe some of the things that you've endured, especially, your time serving our country.
Yeah. You would think everybody would have heard my story. I've told it so many times around school groups, religious groups, and civic groups, and just schools. I've had a chance since I've come home to share, and I just always felt like I needed to tell, since I'm a living history, what I witnessed and experienced, which, sometimes you hear stories, and at least I give some truth and life to my experience. It maybe help people get a clear vision of what Vietnam was.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's extremely important, and I guess it's a very individual thing as well, because I know there are a lot of veterans who don't want to talk about what they went through at all, and so a very individual thing.
Yes. And I've, again, felt a need to speak and have not, been shy about it. I just, again, when I'm asked, at one point when I first came back, I was getting a lot of requests, getting worn out, so I cut back. But, even over the years, at one point when I was speaking to a high school group, I said, I feel like this is ancient history. You weren't even born, when I came home, but yeah.
But it's important to remember, especially this time of year, right? We're on the, just kind of early to mid-November, Veterans Day. Right. And this area in particular, right? Lynchburg area, Central Virginia area, right. Very pro-veteran.
Absolutely.
And I mean, very supportive of everything, sure. That veterans have been through. And I'm sure that's got to feel good for you.
And a lot of it's because of super vet Steve Bozeman. Steve got the ball rolling years ago, getting people into the Vietnam Veterans of America and enrolling people. And he's been the catalyst behind. But we are very strong, veterans. And a group probably before him were with the World War II vets. I knew a lot of them. But he's carried on the torch, and it is really a strong, very supportive group of each other, of veterans' issues, and And the Valor Farm's a good example, down in Alta Vista, where, they're helping those veterans that need help. And there are a lot of programs out there and a lot of veteran support. And I like that grassroots idea. When I joined Vietnam Veterans of America, I really wasn't in any veterans organization, but I liked the idea it was grassroots. And I just can remember we voted at a meeting for money for a local vet whom we knew and who was in need. So we didn't go through any national organization. We didn't get any funds. It came right from the source, and we knew the need. Yeah.
You got captured, you were telling me earlier, about 6 weeks after getting over there.
Yes.
Before we get into that, because there's not a lot before, obviously, for 6 weeks, but talk a little bit about how you wound up in the service.
Well, for those of you who are not doing well in school, get your grades up. I was at Virginia Tech, and I was struggling academically, had some issues, and next thing I was not in a student deferment position any longer, so I had to wait a quarter. We were on a quarter system then, and my plan was to, at the end of one quarter, I could not return for spring quarter, but I was going to go back in the fall quarter, re-enroll, had to sit out a quarter. And so I went back to work at Meade Corporation, where I worked in the summertime, worked in a labor pool, made good money, enough to pay tuition. And so they took me back early in the labor pool. And I came home one day, and there was a letter, the greetings from the president. Yeah. And so I got drafted into the U.S. Army. And there's a little story I'll tell you, Rich.
Yeah.
My father-in-law, I dated his daughter in high school, Linda Jean Ivory, and so Linda and I were not dating at the time, but I went to see Clarence. I thought the world of him, old Navy vet and career man, and just served his country well. And so I told him I'd gotten drafted. He said, David, well, did you know that before you go down and raise your hand and get inducted into the U.S. Army, you can join any branch of the service you want? And I said, well, I didn't know that, Clarence. He said, yes. And I would suggest you go join the U.S. Navy because you get 3 hot meals a day, a warm cot to sleep on, and nobody's shooting at you. I used to tell that story in the POW camp, and they all got a laugh. And I told them my reason for not doing that is because I wanted to do 2 years and go home. If I had done a Navy enlistment, I'd had to serve active 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you thought
I got an involuntary extension, needless to say. Yeah.
Yeah, so you thought you'd do 2 years and didn't quite work out.
It turned out more, yes.
Yeah. So you didn't take his advice, and you wound up being drafted into the Army.
I did. June 6, 1967, D-Day. Got on the bus in Roanoke, and off I went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, doing my basic there in advanced infantry training at Fort Polk, Louisiana, and then shipped off after a 30-day leave to Vietnam.
So you're over there, and like we said earlier, I mean, it was only 6 weeks before you wound up getting captured. What was those 6 weeks like, though?
Well, the first week was at a replacement unit, Benoit, and stayed there, and just dirty duty, keeping the place clean and all. And then we got our orders, and mine were at Chulai, which was north of Benoit, and went up there, flew up there on a C-130 and landed on an air base there at Chulai, and I joined the 196th Light Infantry Brigade. Their brigade headquarters are right there on the beach there at Chulai. And then a few days later, shipped out to my company, which was out in the field, working off of Firebase Central in Quang Nam Province, about 20 miles west of Tam Key, which is the provincial capital of Quang Nam Province.
So a week kind of waiting and cleaning up,
mm-hmm.
and then you get shipped off and you go north.
Right.
You get to your base, and it's a couple weeks more before.
Well, we after I got to Firebase, it was probably about 3 or 4 days later. How it worked, the operation there, 3 companies of a battalion would be working search and destroy around the area, around the Firebase. And 1 company would be pulling security for the Firebase, for artillery pieces. So my company was just finishing their rotation. So about 3 days later, we walked off fire base. In the whole month of December, we operated in what was called Quezon, Queson, not to be confused with Quezon, but the Quezon Valley there in Quang Nam Province, doing search and destroy missions. And pretty quiet event. Day to day, we would go about 1,000 meters, going to villages, looking for the enemy, going up on hillsides, just trying to locate.
You said pretty quiet. Did you not run into the enemy much? Or?
We did not. And I found out later they run into you. They're waiting for you. That's generally the way it worked. Yes.
So how did it happen? I mean, you're there.
Well,
a few weeks
at the end of the month, every day we're going search and destroy. So after 30 days, and we get resupplied every 4 days with sea rations, and put them in a backpack, and off we go. And if your boots have gotten rotten, deteriorated, you get a direct exchange, a DX, and they bring boots out, ammo, whatever we need. And so we're off again. One time the weather was socked in, so we went about 6 or 7 days, and we'd used all our sea rations. So we started begging for rice for the villagers in the villages we went. And
how were they? Were they pretty friendly to you?
They're very genteel. They always had a smile on their face. They went into very primitive conditions. The villages we went into consisted of old men and women, young children, young women, and any males were under the age of 17. So there were no men of military ages in the villages because they were conscripted by South Vietnamese army, or North Vietnamese got them and brought them in their army. So, yeah, my heart went out to those people, Rich, when I first saw them. I thought, oh, my, they caught right in the middle of this, just trying to eke out a living off this land. And it's hard back-breaking work to work those rice paddies. The women are out there working them because the men aren't there. They got the little babies, on their back, and they're planting those seedlings. We were there at the time of the year when they were planting the seedlings. But, anyway, yeah. So,
but we supportive of the American effort to try and help.
Well, that was hard to determine. They were friendly and good to us, but the day I was captured, I'll get to that later. But so at the end of the month, we did what they call a stand down. The helicopters came and took us on an assault on the beach down on the eastern part of Quang Nam Province. And we assaulted and we captured some Viet Cong. And then they put us on a truck on Highway 1 there near Tam Key, north of Tam Key, and rode us back to our brigade headquarters. So we had supposed to have a 4-day in-country R&R. And, of course, we were ready for a warm shower, a little, not pulling security, doing, the grunt work. We were just there in the day room in the area there where our brigade was, our company was, and we just kind of relaxed. And then they called us out early, and we got on Chinooks and went back out because the company had been hit the night before, and they needed us back in there. So we ended up going back up on fire base. It was a pretty arduous trek, but we got back up there. And that night, it looked like the 4th of July. They hit a company, a sister company of 2nd of the 1st. I was 3rd of the 21st. And we could see the rounds, the communist rounds, green rounds going in, and they tore up that company pretty badly. And we had a helicopter, gunship flying support. It got shot down. They fired flares and artillery all night. And we got off the base the next morning, got helicopters, and off we went down to the area where the company had been attacked. And it was just pretty horrific scene. Going there, and you had a picture just in your mind. You could visualize this company had set up a perimeter, and they had gotten inside the perimeter. And I saw a bush cap with gray matter in it, and just my first experience, seeing, and there were bodies of North Vietnamese that were piled up there, ready to be, taken away.
So that was really your first kind of experience of...
Right. I wasn't in a firefight, but yes, coming into where the company had been
But
pretty much wiped out. They had some survivors.
well, I mean, what's that like for you seeing that for the first time?
Well, Rich, you don't process it like I'm going to die or, I'm afraid. Well, you do that night. There was a little fear, they might hit us, and we were on high alert, and your senses are up and you're ready, you got your gun ready and you're hoping, you're prepared. But to see that,
is it fair to say that that's where kind of the reality hit you of being in war and understanding what it was all about, or had that kind of settled into your brain?
That happened a few weeks earlier when we were up on a hillside clearing it off because the intelligence said there was a company of North Vietnamese troops who were going to set up on that hillside and launch attacks or fire RPGs over our fire base. And so we were cleaning up, and I had my steel pot off, and next thing I was knocked about 15 feet off this hillside. It was ringing in my ears. I kind of blacked out. And when I thought I'd broken my back, but I reached up my head, and my head was bloody. I'd gotten a piece of shrapnel in my head, which I still have. And up till then, hadn't thought a whole lot about it, but they put me on a medevac ship along with Smitty, who got all torn up in his back with shrapnel, and flew us back to the field hospital. And X-ray machine wasn't working, so the doctor said, you're okay. Send me to
you're okay. You have shrapnel in your head.
Send me to second surge. I wouldn't, I'd be okay. And it's interesting because after that incident, I'm thinking, whoa. In fact, I wrote then when I was there at the clinic there, at second surge, waiting to be transferred back up to second brigade. Up to our brigade headquarters at Chulai. I wrote a letter home, to my parents. Said, hey, I wrote a letter to my brother Joe. It's what I remember. He doesn't have the letter, but I recall writing him and saying, if anything happens to me, make sure Mom and Dad are okay. I have 6 siblings, so I've had a lot of support. But rather than write them, and of course, I had put on when I came in country that I did not want my parents notified. If I just got a minor wound, I would write them. So I wrote them and told them I'd been wounded and everything was okay. Just a piece of shrapnel in my head.
That's all.
That's all.
Linda, you're a high school sweetheart. You've been married to her forever.
Right.
Were you together when you wound up going over? I know you said right before that you guys weren't together when you talked to her dad.
Right.
Had you gotten together?
No, we hadn't.
So while you were over there, you were not a couple?
We were not. No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, we weren't. Yeah, I had a lot of good years that I remembered in the POW camp to fall back on. The good years at Brookfield playing football and sports and of course dating her, all good memories that help you through. And of course my faith was that really sustained me. But we operated after we got into this place where the company had been ambushed, C Company, second or the first, had been ambushed. And we set up a perimeter that night, didn't get hit. And we started doing patrols through there. There was a helicopter had been shot down with Frank Anton and 3 crew members. And one of the co-pilot in the helicopter had evaded and gotten back to friendly Arvin base, South Vietnamese Army base, and the others were captured. Him and Robert Lewis and Jim Feaster, his crew chief, and 2 door gunners. So Anton's helicopter, he had auto-rotated, hit a rice paddy dike coming down, and it flipped the tail boom up in the air, and they'd already booby-trapped it, the Vietnamese had, the North Vietnamese. Anyway, we operated. And about 2 days later, we swept down through the valley, and with another company called Task Force Oscar, and we broke for lunch. And the other company was with us. They set up a perimeter up from where we were, and we set up a perimeter. And I have to tell you this, Rich. Listeners might want to know. Full strength. Infantry line company has about 200 men. We probably had 81 men in my infantry line company.
Wow, okay.
We were short-handed.
Why was that?
Huh?
Why was that?
That I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. So we set up and helicopter came in and brought some resupplies to us. And when it took off, it took some ground fire. So they got on the horn with my commanding officer, Roland Belcher, and said, hey, we took some ground fire. You may want to send some men out to look for these people. So he sent a message out, radio to each one of the platoons. And so I didn't have much of an appetite. Missed my mama's cooking. I hadn't been in country that long. Eating sea ration, I ate a little bit, but I hadn't really got acclimated. And so I had finished eating, and the others still. So I was not from Tennessee. I didn't volunteer, but I did, in this case, say, hey, I went with a squad of about 20 men. And we went into the village we'd been in earlier. It was on the other side of the Lau River. And we call fire and moving into the villages. We knew women and children in there, but we fired on it anyway. We set down a base of fire and moved forward so the enemy, suppress their fire if they happened to be there. And we got in the village, and people were screaming in there. Nobody had been hit by any fire from us. And that's what I was going to tell you. And they forgot to tell us that the North Vietnamese company was on the other side, catty corner.
Oh, wow.
And did not tell us that. So
that seems like a pretty big thing to not tell someone.
It is, right, in knowing. Yeah. They caught right in the middle. So North Vietnamese are in at night, and they pay dearly, I'm sure, if they reveal their whereabouts. So we set up a little. We left the village, went to the edge of the village, right there on the banks of the Lau River, and the river was up. During the rainy season, it was up pretty good current. And a decision was made. Captain Belcher joined us. He was not with us, but he came and joined us about this time and had a little command post there and said, okay, we're going to go across this river, go into that village, and see if they're in there. And we're going to leave 5 men as a rear support. Okay. So that's what we did. And so we were on file. I was the last man in the file of men. And I heard a mortar round go down the tube, and I said, we don't have a fire mission. So I knew. And what happened, the North Vietnamese had those mortars set up on the side of the river from where we were going into the village and walked the men right into the withering fire. So I did not get hit because I was not in that line of fire. But Captain Belcher was killed. My platoon Sergeant George Seahigh from Los Angeles was killed. My platoon leader, Frank Sieverts, was killed. And about everybody, but 6 of us survived.
How close were you to?
I was probably 60, 70 meters away.
Okay.
But when I went across, got across the river and got cover. The 5 men I joined had pulled off the battlefield and gotten cover behind this creek bank. And so I joined them. And they started coming down on us. They were coming down this little trail, crossing the river to attack the 5 guys on the other side. And they didn't see us at first, and we were shooting them as they were coming down. And then they came down on us. We could hear, and we threw grenades up over the creek bank. We could not see them, and we were throwing grenades over. And it got quiet, and we figured they broke contact to try and figure out where we were and how to get to us. That's the only reason I can think they broke contact, because they outnumbered us. So the commanding officer, Richard Frank Williams, first sergeant, 41 years old, and Top had been in combat in Korea. He had been in combat in Vietnam. And he, old, crusty sergeant, and he was the voice of command. He said, okay, we're going to low crawl up this creek, shorten the distance across this open rice paddy, and make an orderly withdrawal back to our CP group and join up with them. And so we crawled up a creek bank, and we got to a position where the creek bank leveled off, and we could see them in the village. They owned the place. They were walking around with the AK-47, and we started moving. And once we started moving to get back across the rice paddy, they moved their weapons. And so it was me, Mike Oliver, and Top was still down in the creek bed. And then 3 other men had moved up at various locations on this tiered rice paddy off this creek bank. And top went up and over, and the fire was really heavy. And he yelled down when he got down behind his rice paddy dike. He said, the next man's got to get down quick. He said, it's really heavy fire. So I looked at Ollie, and he was a ranking man. He'd been in country 8 months. I was a newbie, so he went up and over, and he got shot up bad. He got shot bad. Top told me later he tried to grab his backpack and pull him down. He wasn't able. But the next thing I hear is Top trying to keep Ollie from going into shock. I can hear Ollie screaming. He's been hit, shot up bad. He said, just take it easy. He said, I know you're hit. I'm hit too. We're going to get help. And that's the first time I knew Top had already taken a round through his hand, hadn't said a word. He's still there fighting with his M79. But Rich, let me get to the testimony. So I'm lying there. I'm the most forward man. Things are pretty quiet. They're not coming at us right at that particular moment. And Top tells us to hold our position. We're going to get help. Our CP is going to come up and help us out. And so I'm lying there, and I know I'm going to die. There's no way I'm going to make it home. And yes, I did. I was afraid. I was scared. I was shaken. And the word of God came to me, to live as Christ, to die as gain. It kept going through my head. And when I give that testimony to church groups, I tell them, I learned memory verses, but I don't really remember that particular verse. But, God gave it to me. He just gave it to me. And I realized I believe, in the resurrection, and I calmed down. I said, hey, I'm going to die. I'm a believer. And my next thought was, I hope the bullet hits me in the head. I'm gone pretty quickly. But, of course, I ended up getting captured. But, yeah. And
so that's when you got captured?
That's when I got captured. Right. Yeah, they eventually...
So you thought you were going to die?
They outmaneuvered and got behind us and finally took us prisoner, yeah.
So you thought you were going to die. You wind up getting captured instead.
Right.
What was it like when that realization hit you that, hey, look, I'm... well, I guess you didn't know right then and there you weren't going to die because you had no idea what they were going to do with you.
Right. I was in the mindset after I got captured for about 30 days or longer that they were going to take us out and shoot us. They didn't. I had been trained. They did not take prisoners. Of course, part of that's to resist as long as you can and hold out. But just after they got to me, they put a man in charge of me with a sidearm. A Vietnamese, he came up maybe to my chest, and I was his captive, and he was walking ahead of me. The 3 riflemen that had captured me, they went about policing up the battlefield, getting ammunition, rifles, whatever they needed, supplies off of the dead Americans and their own dead. And so they go about their business. And in a panic, I'd been taught to escape as soon after capture as possible. I wrapped my arm around, my left arm around his arms and pinned his arms to his side. I put my right hand over his mouth, and I've got him in a vice grip. And I'm desperate to get away, and I know I've got to kill him without making any noise. So I go for a bayonet. He's got in a scabbard, and I can't get the bayonet out. In the struggle, I drop my hand, of course, to get the bayonet. He starts screaming bloody murder. He goes and gets the bayonet out. He's able to get it out. He stabs me in the back, just a superficial wound. I wheel away from him because he's got a American-issued .45, and I do get it out of the holster, and I hold it up to his head, and I pull the trigger, and it's not locked and loaded. So my abortive escape attempt, my feeble escape attempt failed. And when I look up, I've got the weapon. I know how to lock and load it, but I look up, and it looks like a whole North Vietnamese army standing there. And they took my boots from me. It was a part of punishment and duck winged me that night. But anyway, yeah.
And I'm sorry, duck wing?
Yeah, pull my arms back behind me and tie me. And this combo wire is real thin wire, and my arm swelled up to twice their normal size. That's probably the most excruciating pain I've been in, and they didn't loosen them until the next morning. So, but anyway, yeah.
So
anyway, yeah. So So after this incident, they get me in the village where they own the place. They're walking around, and American artillery starts coming in. Apparently, they got our coordinates, and they drop in artillery. And I think I'm going to get killed by my own artillery. And so when I get out of the hole, when it subsides, they take me down this trail, and they're leading me back. I thought they were leading me down to take me to some site and shoot me. And so, yeah, they're going to kill me is just what I'm sure they're going to do. And I end up at an old plantation house out in the backwoods there. The French had old French house, and that's where their headquarters are set up. It's probably about a click away from where it had been captured. They had commo wire strung out. You know, you think they're a ragtag group, but they're pretty well organized and fighting, you know, Americans with superior firepower. And, you know, it's just, yeah.
So this was the second time that you thought you were going to get killed.
It was.
This
yes.
day. And again, same mindset, you know, you're a believer, you know, if it's my time, there's a better place wait. I mean, right. That's because I mean, I think we've all, you know, seen, and I hate to relate it to this, but for those of us who haven't been through what you've been through, we've seen movies, we've read books about, you know, people who, okay, this is it, you know, they're going to kill me. And, you know, I can't even imagine being in that situation. And right. I mean, you lived it for 5 years.
I did. The first, you know, I'd been in battle with a weapon. Now I'm in battle without a weapon because I got interrogated. You know, it was already dark, and they would take us 4 of the men captured. Ollie was killed, and so was Sergeant Booker. So out of the 6, they killed 2 men of that group that survived initially.
Any idea why those 2 and not the other 4?
They were in combat. They were during the firefight. Yeah, they were still,
gotcha.
During the firefight. They take me down for my turn for interrogation, and this guy speaks horrible English. Now, what is your unit? What is your unit? And he's trying to find out, you know, what my unit is, you know, how many men in my unit, things that they already know because they've been tracking us. But the whole thing of interrogation that I've realized is to break you down. And so here again, it takes a lot of courage to give you a name, rank, service number, and date of birth, which you only can give according to the Geneva Convention, the American Code of Conduct. And he's made it clear he's got the power of life and death over me. Well, I've survived combat. I survived an escape attempt. And here he is. And I'm thinking. So I gave my name, and David Harker, US 529395857, and December the 8th, 1945, private first class. And but they had to get off the battlefield. That's why he didn't press me more. But we had that come later too on up the trail. About 2 or 3 days later, they did another interrogation. So it's tough. Yeah, you're on your own. It's mind, you know, over matter, pretty much, or resisting them to parry all their advances to try and break you down and get you to turn, you know, your fellow countrymen.
So the interrogation part, you know, you said when they kind of duck winged you with a wire, that was the most pain that you'd ever been through. So, you know, as far as the interrogation went, was it merely more just questioning, or you know, were there different torture techniques?
No, just question, just there. I squatted down, and they had lanterns, and they were coming and going. The guys, whatever their duty was, but some of them stood around and watched during the interrogation. But we walked that night through artillery barrages. There was some arc lighting, B-52 bombing, saturation bombing, a good little distance off, and finally got to a position. They put us in, they call it like a spider hole, this dugout bunker that they had. And I tried to get Jim Strickland to untie my wires, but the more he tried, the tighter they seemed to get. It wasn't until the next morning when we got up, daylight, that they loosened them. And And I thought I wasn't going to have any feeling in my hands ever again, but eventually the swelling went down, the feeling came back. But several days later, we were at a village that moving us on farther west toward the Trung Son mountain range, out where their territory is, where their hideouts are. And in this little village, now this village was run by the Viet Cong or the NVA, because, the villagers were there. They knew we were prisoners and they supported them. It was a stomping off point. And they called us out again, and just processing all this, that I'm captured, what's ahead, how can we, get out of this situation?
Right.
Where are we going to end up? To take me back and put me under the pressure of giving information, which I'm not supposed to do as an American fighting man, was really disquieting, to say the least. So they take me down and set me on like a bamboo bench, and there's a bamboo table in the middle of this hut. And there's a little kid, looks like he's 15 years old, with a fixed bayonet on an old Mauser rifle. So the guard takes me and puts me with him, and he goes off. And that kid stand there, and in walks this North Vietnamese officer who's got a cut down the side of his face, a big scar. And he looks out of the movies. And I figured probably got that fighting the French, maybe because he looks like he's old enough to have been involved in the French resistance, Dien Bien Phu or whatever. And he's a no-nonsense guy. Okay? You can see it in his face. And then the interpreter, Bay, comes in, and we see Bay later. And he speaks pretty good English. And this officer lays his sidearm on the bamboo table, telling me, hey, I can shoot you if I want. And he starts asking the questions. And I start giving the name, rank, service number, and date of birth. And it's just taking all I can muster. And I'm thinking at some point, if they take me out and blindfold me and I hear the click of somebody locking and loading a weapon, I'm going to tell them everything they need to know. But he hit a nerve, Rich, during the interrogation. He asked me about my family. I hadn't really thought about my family up till then. I'm here in the moment, what's going on with me. Mm-hmm. And I really hadn't had time. Now, one night on the trail, I started singing hymns from the old Baptist hymnal. I'm singing them out loud, and they don't seem to care. My voice is echoing down through the valley, and that gives me but here I am.
Did anyone join in with you?
Huh?
Did anyone join in?
They didn't. I don't know whether there were any Southern Baptists with us. Pop was from out California. I guess they got some Southern Baptists out there. But Jim Strickland from down Dunn, North Carolina. But anyway, yeah. So this interrogation, when he says that, I almost start crying. And I do tell him how I got to Vietnam on a plane. I figure, hey, something to keep him off my back. I flew commercial airline, I don't know whether he has a picture of what I'm talking about or not. But he finally sends me on back up with the other group. And that was the end of that interrogation. And a few days later, we walk into a POW camp, and that begins my POW experience in the jungles of South Vietnam for 3 years.
So what was that camp like?
That camp had a nasty water hole. When I first got there, I met the only American physician captured in the war, Dr. Hal Kushner from Danville, Virginia. Hal graduated G.W. Danville in 1958, I believe. Went off to UNC, got a degree in biology, went to MCV and studied medicine there. And then he went to Tripler for his residency, for his internship, I'm sorry. So he joined the Army to do his internship. And while he's there, he sees these wounded men coming in to Tripler. So he volunteers for Vietnam. And he became a flight surgeon for the 1st Cavalry Division, I think 2nd of the 9th. And he was on a night helicopter flight, and they flew into the side of a mountain. He's the only one that survived. So he ended up in a POW camp, which is kind of a godsend because we had no knowledge of medicine. He did. They didn't really have any medicine. We couldn't even call him doc, but he could tell us things we needed to do, for our health and as best he could. And he could do some minor surgery whenever he got an abscess. We would secret away a little razor blade, and he could use that, open up, establish drainage, whatever. But he did, when we were there early, it was June of '68, about 4 months after we were captured. And we had dysentery in a camp. We had a high-ranking political cadre, Mr. Huan Ho, that was there. And so Kushner got an audience with him, which was rare, and he went up, and I think he recognized him as a doctor. In fact, he tried to get him to go to one of their field hospitals and serve as a physician there, working. And Kushner thought it was against the Geneva Convention, too. He found out later he could have done that, but he stayed with us. And anyway, so he said, these prisoners are going to die if you don't get something here. This is rampant. So the next few days later, in comes chloromycetin, antibiotic, in the middle of nowhere, in a place where there's nothing, no medicine. So that man had a lot of pull, and he got the medicine in. And here's the next thing that happened. They started dispensing it. They would call us up to their little hut, and the so-called nurse, who was probably equivalent to, I don't know, an LPN, was dispensing the medicine. And when they brought it back in the compound, the men would bring it back. Kushner got us together. He said, okay, men, he said, I know, you guys, the situation here, and we can get paranoid and can't trust each other, but you got to trust me on this one. Some of you that have a medicine don't have dysentery. I don't have a microscope. I can't look and see, but I can tell pretty much by looking the naked eye whether you do or not, and I know. And some of you have it, and you don't have enough medicine to eradicate it. So let me you give me your medicine, and I'll disperse it. And it's amazing. We trusted him that much, and everybody did. I don't think I got any medicine. But anyway, So, yeah.
So the conditions in this POW camp, I mean, it sounds like at the very least that they're listening to Dr. Kushner, that they're trying to keep you guys healthy. But what was it like? Were you guys underground? Were you in cages or cells?
No. We were in a compound.
Okay.
Punji stakes around, honed down piece of bamboo like a razor. The South Vietnamese were in a camp next to us, and two of them went out one night, and one of them cut himself and left a blood trail, and they tracked him down. And in the Moat Yard, the mountain people who lived around, and speared him to death. But I was going to tell the story about Kushner. The water there in that first camp was nasty, just putrid. He said, don't drink any water unless, they told me he was there, and I went down. That's where he was, around a water hole. Found out he was from Danville. It's like old home week. Here's somebody from Danville. We're just 60 miles away, and we meet here. What are the possibilities? You're going to meet somebody from Danville, Virginia, and you're from Lynchburg. They had a POW camp 13,000 miles from home. But he said, don't drink that water. He said, only drink anything that's boiled. So we outboiled our water. We lived in very primitive conditions. Now, the Moat Yards, the peasant people I was telling you, they lived in back in time. But the Moat Yards, the mountain people on the mountainsides, they live in the Stone Age. They live even farther back. Their living conditions just, you can't imagine people existing.
What are you getting? I mean, you can't drink the water unless it's boiled. So at least you have the opportunity to boil some water. What do you?
They do. They give us a big container, and we boil. Yeah.
Okay.
And
so
they make an earthen hearth for us. And Rich, when you cook, and we did cook, you can't have smoke going up through the canopy of jungle because the spotter planes will see it. So they built a chimney underground. They're very clever. They learned all the ways of evading and avoiding enemies, spotting them. And we couldn't cook at night because they had light, and they would see the light. But we had a little bowl of rice per meal. The rice was not Uncle Ben's white enriched rice. It was a red rice that had been ground up, and it had weevils in it. It had rat feces in it. We cleaned it, and we said it's best to eat it in the dark, but we boiled it up, of course. That was barely enough to keep us alive. The bulk of our diet was a root called manioc, cassava root. third countries, South America, Asia, and Africa, they grow it. The poor peasant people grow it, and it has some food value. But those of us who are physically able would go over some pretty rough narrow mountain trails, little narrow trails, and pull those roots and bring them back to camp. We exerted a lot of energy, but probably all of us would have died if it hadn't been for that root. And those of us who were able had the good health to go get them. And every day was just either going out to get firewood to cook with, going to get these roots, or just the boredom of sitting there in a compound talking, and hoping, maybe Americans would come in someday and liberate us. But and then so come September, my first sergeant died. He went downhill pretty quick. His wound never healed up. It atrophied, and he just...
And he had been shot through the hand.
He had been shot through the hand. And then Francis Eugene Cannon, PFC, that was with us, captured with the four of us, he died. He had a bad wound in his neck, and he got caught shrapnel on his neck and his back, and it never healed up. He was you could talk all day. What a tough soldier. Just anyway. So they died, and then William David Port, who had been captured near where we were a few weeks after I was captured, he had received the Medal of Honor for his heroism trying to save his men, and I didn't find that out till we came home later. And they thought he had been killed, but he survived just long enough to come to our camp, and they had taken him to one of their field camps. He got some good medicine, and he got protein, monkey meat every day in his diet. And then when they brought him to our camp, they didn't have anything to keep him alive,
So how many of there are you in your camp?
Well, it grew to about 19 men during this period of time, and then these 6 men died from September to January of '69, and then we buried 2 more men. Joseph Taki died December 25th of 1969, and then Denny Wayne Hammond died, a Marine. He died March of 1970. He was the last to die.
So you were in captivity for just over 5 years.
Right.
They wound up moving you to the Hanoi Hilton at one point. How long were you at the southern location, though?
We were there 3 years.
You were there 3 years.
3 years.
And was every day pretty much the same? I mean...
Right.
I mean, just...
It was. Just fighting the elements. American artillery came into camp one time, I was telling you. We got B-52 strikes close by, harassing and interdicting fire, yeah. So
what do you do? What do you guys do to pass the time and not just sit there and think about, is this it? Is this
telling
how
the
it
same
ends?
stories over and over?
Is there...
We did make a checkerboard. They did give us some paper, so we did that. But a lot of time was spent just doing manual labor kind of things.
Yeah. And I understand it. At some point, you had a Bible.
Did. In December of '68, 11 months after I'm captured, the interpreter, Mr. Home, comes inside the compound with a little Gideon Testament.
I'm sorry, who did?
Mr. Home, he was an interpreter.
Okay.
Yeah. That's American. H-U-O-N-G, Home,
okay.
Mr. Home. Yeah.
Okay.
And so Mr. Home brought it in. He said, this little book has something to do with your holiday that's coming up, and you can pick some words and we'll approve them. And so I got my hands on the Bible right away, and I started looking up, to live as Christ, to die as gain. This good Southern Baptist. Philippians 1:21, I found it. I finally went through, I'm looking through. I finally find it. I said, that's my verse, to live as Christ, to die as gain. So they forgot to take it back. We secreted it away in the thatched roof. And Rich, Denny Hammond, when he was dying, he came to me. He said, David, he said, you believe something. Tell me what you believe. I said, well, Denny, let me talk to you. So I got the little Bible out of the thatched roof, went down by the latrine and asked somebody to watch, make sure when the guard came in and let us know. But they wouldn't come down around the latrine. They wouldn't cut. So that was the place I picked. And I went down and told him about when I was 9. I grew up in the church, learning about Jesus. And I just felt a tug at my heart at age 9. I walked the aisle, made a profession of faith. I said, but I pulled the Bible out, and in the back it has the plan of salvation. So I went through that with Denny. He's really in bad shape. He died just a few days later. And so after I finished, he said, David, I believe, what you're telling me. So I had prayer with him. And that night, lying on a bamboo bed, Rich, he said, guy, his voice came out of darkness. He said, guys, I haven't been the best person in the world. He said, please forgive me. And I just thought, wow. Denny Hammond saying that, because he was one to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, You just, you got to make it on your own. He's not going to give you a whole lot of help.
Tough guy, yeah.
Yeah, tough guy. Then he was. But he cared about everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd been in an abortive escape attempt earlier, and the man with him was shot to death, Earl Clyde Weatherman. So, Denny was tough.
It sounds like you had somewhat of a decent relationship with your captors. Is that fair to say?
Different personalities. Some of them a little more friendly, and hey, they were the enemy, but you got to love your enemies according to Scripture. Yeah, no, some of them were. Yeah, and Rich, once you're with them and you begin to understand, you don't believe in this system of government, where it's iron rule and you don't have rights of religion but the people that are caught in it, they're just normal people, They are regular. They want to live and make a living for their family, feed their family. It's just a human existence. And so some of the guards, yes, but some of them were, But I was out on a run one time. I had been sick, and I had malaria. It kicked me really bad for about 30 days. And we did have quinine. That was the only thing we had to take care of. And after about 30 days, it finally goes away. But I got boils in the meantime on my back. But my whole mindset was, if I sit down, I'm going to die. I got to get up and move. And so I was a worker, and maybe some of that goes back to me being an athlete, and I was always in pretty good physical shape. But so I'd go on one of these runs to get roots, and I'm about halfway down the trail outside the compound, I don't know, 50 meters or so, and I realize I'm not ready to do this. I'm getting faint. My legs feel weak, and I try to get the guard to let me go back because we're not very far. And no. Off we go. And so Willie Watkins, one of the prisoners, is a real worker bee. Willie had a stride of about 10 feet, tall guy, lanky guy, and he could carry a lot of weight on his back. He was the lead guy. He said, David, you lead the way. He said, you lead the way. He said, when we get to the field, you'll just sit down and you'll come back with an empty basket. We got to the field, and the guard said, no. Anyway, when I ended up leaving, I had a basket, and I could barely get on my back. I could barely move, and I'm the lead guy, and the guards are antsy. They said, move out. They left me with one guard, Lom, and the others went off, 3 other men. So here I am by myself with this guard, and I get up, walking up this hillside. I'm going to die. There's no way I'm going to make it up this hillside. So I pretended to faint. I fell over, and next thing I knew, he had put a round in the chamber of his rifle. He had fixed his bayonet, and that'll get you moving, even though physically you think you can't do it. And I got to thinking, he's going to shoot me here, go back and say, I tried to escape. So I mustered up enough, strength to get on up a trail. And, and Lom wasn't one, that was really mean. He was kind of but he was a guard, and he meant business. So, yeah.
So a few years there, and then you get moved up to the Hanoi Hilton.
Right.
That was a long hike, wasn't it?
It was. Yeah, we started out February the 1st of 1971, and we got north on April 1st, April Fool's Day of 1971. 60-day hike.
Wow.
60-day hike. And we had to go over the Trung Son mountain range that separates Laos from Vietnam. And the rough countryside of South Vietnam was, hard to deal with. But once we got into Laos, there was more rolling hills and a little better walking. But every day, Rich, we passed battalions of North Vietnamese troops, fresh troops infiltrating into South Vietnam down the trail through Laos.
Wow.
Yeah, quite an eye-opener. Because we'd been kept away from any troop movement at all where we were held, intentionally, I'm sure. So we walked the trail, and we got to Hanoi, and I was held there 2 years. And that was, you talk about boredom, yeah. 23 hours in a cell, let you out in the compound for 1 hour a day, and then you just complete boredom. And on Sunday, they weren't Christians, but they observed Sunday. That was the day off. We didn't get out. They did bring us food, so they cooked for us. But it was the same old stories time after time.
So worse conditions than when you were in South Korea?
No.
Vietnam, I'm sorry.
Right. Yeah. We had food. We had a loaf of French bread, small loaf. So we started putting on weight. And we had soup. It was pumpkin soup, a cabbage soup. And once in a while, we get a little protein, a little Chinese, People's Republic of China Spam, which had more fat than the American Spam does. But hey, it was something to eat. Yeah. And they would bring sugar sometimes, and we'd dip our bread in the sugar like a sweet roll. So, yeah. So we had medical attention. I got malaria after I got there. And they came inside the middle of the night and took me and put me in a separate cell and started giving me IVs because I'd gotten that sick.
So a better situation once you got moved to Hanoi?
Yeah.
But not as much. And I hate to use the word freedom, but you weren't able to go out.
It was less free. In fact, that was one reason I didn't want to leave the South, because I always thought there's a possibility of getting rescued. You're in North Vietnam, you're in the middle of Hanoi. Yeah, what are the possibilities? Americans will get in there and get you out. But yes, it was better. And we had shelter there, and we had blankets because it got cool, during some of the months up there in North Vietnam.
I have to imagine that at multiple points throughout your 5 years of being a prisoner of war, you sit there and you think to yourself, man, I'm never going to get out of here.
I had one thought that I always remember. I was in Hanoi, and I was probably a year and a half there. War was winding on. We were in the South when Nixon got elected, and they said peace is at hand. And we thought, yay. And the North Vietnamese thought so too. They increased our ration of rice, and they did give us a white rice. And then they shut that down, and they said, have no illusions. So here I am, I'm thinking, if I'm 55 years old when I get released, I don't know if I'm 55, and I'm still in good health, I got some good years ahead of me. So if I can hold out that long.
So there was always that hope that kept you going.
Always, yes. And my relationship with God, as a Christian, I do believe, in the hereafter. I believe in the resurrection, as I said. And, no more pain and suffering. But it's just, and you have that. That's the most important thing. It became the most important thing to me, and it is the most important thing. My relationship with Him, serving Him, and denying myself and helping other people. All those lessons that Christ taught.
And you shared that with other prisoners, right? Because I would imagine some of them had given up hope at some point, or no?
Yeah, we did have men, yes, but they got to a point. We tried to bring them back, Rich, and you just can't. They got to that point of no return. Yeah, and we always said if we have an injection of will to live, we would give it to them. They started falling off. And then when it got to that point, they're not eating. We can't make them eat.
And you could tell.
You can tell, yes. we had one man, Frank Anton, that came back from that. He was almost there, and he survived and made it home. Yeah. So
you're in Hanoi for a couple of years. You have this period where you think it's going to end, right? Nixon's in, and you're getting bigger rations, and then they pull it away, and the mindset, they take that away, but you still had hope.
Well, it's a roller
coaster. You still had faith.
Yeah, it's kind of a roller coaster because you get your hope up it's going to end. And so we're there, and we get there in 71. And a year later, the spring of 72, they start bombing Hanoi. We were out of the war. You said conditions better. In Hanoi, there was no bombing. There was no fighting going on around, So we're pretty much removed from the war. And then we hear the jets coming in and striking. Of course, we start applauding because, something's being done. Maybe, it'll bring about a peace. And so that went on for a while. And then in the fall, around September, October, they opened up the compound and let us all out together. The pretense was there's only you and the guys in your cell that are here. Well, because they didn't want communication. And we learned the tap code that you may have heard about. That was taught to all prisoners. And when we got there, they taught us the tap code to communicate with the cell next to you. And then we had the waste buckets, sometimes get messages, piece of paper and get messages to get the other guys, just to keep morale up. And so they opened it up, and we started reading, that the peace agreement was near, that Kissinger had come close to making. So we got excited. Here they are letting us out. And all of us together, they gave us periodicals to read rather than their propaganda. I read War and Peace.
Wow.
Hey, I must have been bored. So, and of course, I've seen other guys in the compound. I've seen through the windows and can talk to them. And so it's just like one big holiday. Well, next thing, they shut the doors. They slammed the doors, pulled the bars down. And on December the 17th of 1972, the B-52 bombers come into Hanoi. And my good friend Dave Young, B-52 pilot, was in one of those waves of bombing. And so they come in and they go all night long. And they do more damage than the fast movers ever did. After I got released, I saw a lot when we were riding through the streets. They really tore up their infrastructure, they tore the train tracks up. Usually they could repair the train tracks after a 100, 200-pound bomb hit it, but these B-50, 500-pound bomb. And so we're cheering, but on the other hand, we're thinking, that bombardier, a navigator can't be off a second. That bomb's going to drop right in the middle of camp. They know where we are. Certainly they know where we are. And so that went on. And finally it stopped. And they announced that the peace agreement's been signed. And that's when we get excited. We are thrilled to death. It's finally over. All this time, these days of suffering and trying to make it through these very harsh times.
And how long was it until you actually got released?
Found out in January. I got released in March.
Wow.
I was going to tell you, on the second night of bombing, I was at a place called Plantation Gardens on the edge of Hanoi. And the pilots had been held there previously. They put us in the back of a deuce, opened up cell doors, backed into the compound, put us on the deuce and a half, said, do not move. If the people in Hanoi see you, they're going to pull a tarp, they're going to pull you out of there and they're going to kill you. And we believed them. And we thought they were going to take us up to China, that World War III was breaking out, okay? Not a good thought, but hey, when is it going to end? It sounds like it's just beginning. But they took us over to Wallow Jail, Hanoi Hilton. So I was held there about 3 months before I got released. And I'm talking about the roller coaster. So the day that I was going to be released, the day before, they come and they take us. They have a list, and my name's on the list. I'm the second or third group. They released us in groups. And my name's on the list. They give us Western-style clothes, a windbreaker, bag like we've been on vacation, you know.
Wow.
And say, okay. And so they come the next morning, they call us out. We go out, put the clothes on. We sit in a holding cell, and noontime rolls around. They bring food in. We said, why are you feeding us? We're going home. I said, the peace agreement's been broken by the U.S.
Oh.
So I had to wait 2 or 3 more days, and they did release us. And you can't, they opened up those big old iron gates to Wallow Jail. It looked like a whole town of Hanoi, the whole city of Hanoi was standing outside, wanted to see the Americans. Put us on these small, like minibuses, and rode through town. Like I said, you could see all the damage. Came down to the hangars, Zalam Airport, where we're going to fly out of. And can't see the plane. You can just see the hangars. And then we sit there for a minute, and then they start moving. As we come around the hangars, we can see the C-141 Starlifter, the Air Force transport plane with the American flag on the back.
And you're
Rich.
like, and that's
God bless America.
It's happening.
It's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just, and then we in a line, and they call our name, and we go up as a 1-star American general. So there's a general from America. So we're going home. He can't leave us here. And they salute, and his counterparts, North Vietnamese generals, there at the table. So going up the ramp, and we get on a plane, and it takes off. And a little while later, the pilot comes on and said, we're now out of Vietnam airspace. We're in international airspace. And I think the whole C-141 just shook. It just like the big cheer that went up. And we landed in the Philippines. And there, American dependents, whose husbands or fathers are stationed there, they line a tarmac. And it's just, just the jubilation. Yeah.
Tell me about, you get back to Lynchburg. And I know that you had a great reception, and I want to hear about that. But
Right.
So many other Vietnam veterans did not have good receptions when they came back, because a lot of the feelings that people had in this country, towards the war itself, and
Right,
and holding you guys responsible is crazy. Right. But you didn't experience that.
Didn't, but we were wondering along the way, how people would feel, about us when the war was over. We had no idea. So to get that warm reception, that was exhilarating, yeah. And we landed at Hickam Field in Hawaii in the middle of the night, and they were lined up against the fence there. Americans were in Hawaii.
Wow.
And they had American flags, small American flags, and they put leis over our neck. So we're almost home, and then we fly over the U.S. And I landed at Andrews Air Force Base. And before then, only the ranking man could get off the plane first and make a statement. And, Marcos was there, and the American ambassador in the Philippines, Hawaii. I don't remember whether there was any reception there, but at Andrews there was, and they had a microphone. And so I went up to it. They said, anybody can say anything. I said, hey, you people really, God bless America. I said, and I remembered the men that didn't make it home. Some of my nephews have sent me that link. I never knew it existed, but it's out there. But just the joy of being home, I had to, tell people thank you for being here, and it's a great country. And Time Magazine quoted me, "Happiness is returning home to the United States of America, where everybody's heart is full of gold, the size of the Empire State Building." Quote David Harker right off the top of my head. Yeah. So March 12th, 1973. If you get Time Magazine, look it up. But yeah, it's just great to be home. But when
tell me about coming to Lynchburg, though.
Yeah, we flew out of Pennsylvania. They sent an aircraft from Cardinal Airline, and so we flew. And the reporter on there from WSET and WLVA at the time, he said, "What do you think about the big reception?" I was like, "What's he talking about?" When we flew over the airport, Rich, I looked down. I had never seen some. I said, in my wildest imagination, I'm going to be in the foyer of my mother's house in a hallway, walk in there, in that little small house there on Taylor Road, and they're going to be my 6 siblings, and several had gotten married children had been born while I was gone. In fact, when I landed in the Philippines, that was the first thing, they told me, your family's okay and nobody's passed away, which was a big relief to me. But so we landed, and I said, whoa, my family really has grown. There's probably about 10,000 people. It was just overwhelming. The Brookfield High School band was there, Kelly Shoemaker, they were playing. My preacher was there, had prayer, and they gave me the keys to the city or whatever. And then the sea parted, and there was a blue 1973 Corvette, and they gave me the keys to that. Some classmates, schoolmates from Brookfield High School, when my name came out on a list and it got reported here that I was coming home, because some thought, well, David's going to make it home. Others thought he probably won't make it, but here I am coming home. They said, we ought to do something for David. So they sold bumper stickers at $1 a piece saying, welcome home, David, had the American flag on it. So that paid for the Corvette, and they gave me a check for $1,100. And so after I got discharged from the Army, I drove the Corvette with my baby brother, David Harker, cross country and got to see America, the Grand Canyon, rode the Pacific Coast Highway. So before I went back to Virginia Tech and got my degree, yeah, great country, great people. Yeah, it's a wonderful place.
And do I understand right? You still have that Corvette?
I do. Yeah, it wasn't a family car, so it kind of disintegrated, but I've had it renovated. Yeah. I enjoy driving it. In fact, I'll put a plug in tomorrow night. It's going to be at the Lynchburg Museum. Mm-hmm. They're opening up the exhibit for Vietnam.
Yep.
And
it's
so
it's
going to be out front with the lights on it. I'm taking it down. And so at 5 o'clock, you're going to hear this afterwards.
Right. Okay. But it's still, you've still got it, and
I still do.
And you still drive it.
I do.
That's awesome.
Yeah, an old guy. I get thumbs up from these young kids. I enjoy it, Rich. In fact, I'll drive it in 30-degree weather with my Virginia Tech stocking cap on and scarf around, because I love a T-top off. I'm an outdoors guy, so yeah.
It's funny, those kids that you were talking about giving you the thumbs up or whatever, right, and knowing they don't even know the story behind it.
Right.
Which is crazy.
But sometimes that's funny. I'm not used to it, but now at the gas station, I'll kind of share with people if they talk about it, and people just say, look, yeah. So, yeah. It's good for people to know, yeah.
It is good for people to know. And I understand that there are a lot of veterans, like we mentioned earlier, who don't, want to share their story. Right. And it's a very personal thing, but the fact that you do, I think, is incredible. Right.
And the thing, too, Rich, we don't forget, there were people scarred by the war mentally, as well as physically. And we don't forget we take care of them. But I've had the good fortune of having good health, and I assimilated back, and I just so proud to have served, in the corrections as a probation parole officer. I think I helped a lot of guys along, gals. I had some women on probation. And then I did parole interviews for the board, and then I was on the parole board. So, we give people a fair shake, even criminals. They get a fair shake. Now, some, do need to be behind bars, but there are, and that's a tough job.
I can imagine.
That's a tough job. It's not an easy job, and it's not scientific, but you have a lot of information. But yeah, I enjoyed my years, doing that. In fact, I'll see men from time to time, say, hey, you want my PO?
In the last minute or two, anything, did I not ask anything? Is there anything else you want to share?
I do. The community. I grew up here, so a lot of stories I know, and men and women that I went to school with and I still have contact with. But my wife, Linda, and I have enjoyed, so many good years of marriage. We've raised 2 children in this wonderful community who've taken advantage of the public education system, of youth sports, and that just, that means so much to me. And my daughter, Megan, is the theater director at Brookfield High School. If you want to go see a good play, Megan loves those children. She brings them in behind the scenes, on stage, and just she puts her heart and soul in it. And that's what makes me proud. And she has 3 children. Her oldest is now a freshman at William & Mary, Emily, and my son Adam is an architect. Went to NC State, got a master in architecture. He has 2 daughters, but they both are serving the Lord in church, and that means a lot to me. Yes, that's the most important, that they're raising their family in the faith, and that's and all my good, friends. Yeah.
Well, I just want to thank you. I mean, again, we're right around Veterans Day, and, one day a year is certainly not enough to celebrate what you guys sacrifice for the country, but, and for the rest of us. But, just thank you again, not only for what you did and what you went through, but for sharing the story. I mean, it's incredible.
And on a note there, Rich, I just think back to my generation. It went to Vietnam, we didn't really need accolades or applause or congratulations, because we served out of the goodness of our hearts. Ask not, what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And men went off to service like their fathers, uncles did in World War II. And the same idea, we're going to make a people free. We're going to make sure that they have free. Think about that. You leave your home here, your good life here, and you go to Vietnam for people, and die. Hey, that's America. That you're willing to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Very, very much a pleasure talking with you, hearing your story, and just thank you again for all you've done.
Yeah.
David Harker joining me here on No Holds Barred.